is 7 o'clock and I will call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. I hope that you're all doing well.
Good evening.
Thank you for making the time to be here tonight. All right, I'm going to pull up my agenda. All right, is there any public to be heard? Erica, you might be the one who knows that.
Brian, I did not hear anything from Nicole about that. I don't have anything in the shared notes.
Karen Phillips is here. I don't see any public. I don't have notes of any public who specifically signed up, so we'll assume there is no public to be heard. And with that, we will move on to the approving the minutes from the September 10th board meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Great. And a second?
Second.
Deanna seconds. Thank you. Are there any modifications or clarifications required on the board meetings, board minutes? Take that as a no. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Karen, who's taking notes?
Me.
Okay. Raise your hand for Karen. She's our note taker.
If I can't see everybody, you can see everybody, right, Brian?
Yeah, so I have Deanna, Graham, Madeline, Ann, Karen Phillips, myself with our hands raised. Caitlin is either going to, oh no, she's raising her hand. Okay. Caitlin is making the bold move of voting for approving the minutes as well. So that motion passes. Okay, which brings us to the borrower rehabilitation loan modification request. Kathy, are you going to walk us through that?
I am.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right. So this is a household that received a rehab loan, and it was a repayment one because of the income that they had at the time when they applied. And they were making payments and everything was going along fine until COVID hit and the husband lost his job. And they contacted us right away. We've been working with them around this. We deferred for a short period of time, which staff has the ability to do. But now things have not gotten any better. And so they are requesting assistance, and staff's recommendation is to move this to a fully deferred loan, permanently deferred loan, with the principal set where it currently is now. And then repayment would come to us at refinance, sale, or transfer of the home. They have met with the housing counselor as is required, and it is showing that they have a monthly deficit. They have a couple of kiddos in college, in addition to trying to make it through this. So it just seemed like it is postponing the inevitable if we went to a year's worth of deferred payments to see how things expanded, as opposed to just going ahead and doing a permanently deferred loan. So that is that staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy? I have one question. So based on their AMI, it was not a permanently deferred, but now they've dropped down.
Mm-hmm.
What was it, 68,000? Is that right?
18.
Oh, 18. Okay, I looked at the wrong number. So I'm only curious in regards to process. God willing, things will get better, and everybody will be back at full employment. Or let's just say everybody. Is there a time when the city would review that and say, this really should move back to a repayment status?
No, if sorry to interrupt. If
No.
we're going to the permanently deferred, then we would just leave it at that.
Okay.
At that time and not switch things back and forth. They can always make payments if they want to. If things do get better and they want it, not hanging over their heads, or want to be able to sell free and clear, they can go ahead and make payments, and we'll take those and
Okay.
keep track of it. But once we defer it, we just leave it that way and not go back and forth.
Okay.
We try not to do this as few times as possible
Right.
per client.
Right. And my sense is, even when things do return to more stability and employment, people are going to be catching up for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not like all of a
That's
sudden.
what we're thinking, that it's going to be very difficult to recapture their financial position where they were. So
Yeah.
some might, but a lot of them are going to struggle for quite a while.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Let's see, are we approving your recommendation, or are we moving to, so let's say, to approve staff's recommendation to move this loan to permanently deferred?
Motion to approve staff's recommendation to move the loan to permanently deferred.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Pat. Second.
Anne? Okay. Caitlin, you're like super fast with that hand. But then at the same time, I got the voice, so my brain can't parse the two. So seconded by Anne. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand so it is visible. And that is Anne, Karen Phillips, Madeline, Caitlin, Graham, and Deanna, and myself. So all in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we can bring at least some relief to their difficult situation. That really is hard. Karen, the next section on the allocation, and I know that we were going to talk about, the board had requested some equity language, and that was going to be in there. Do you want to wait for Eliberto and we can move
Yes.
forward with?
Yeah, because yes. So maybe we can, if you want to, and he is probably the point person for homesteading. So maybe we can, Brian, we can jump down to the site visit updates. So
Sure.
Matt here tonight, and Graham, and talk about Longmont Meals on Wheels and Boulder Shelter. And then we
Okay.
can back up to the other one, Eliberto gets here.
That sounds great. So why don't we go
I'm
to
gonna leave.
agenda item 7, site visit update. Kathy?
Leaving.
I'm just going to leave.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Kathy. Have
Thanks.
a great evening.
Bye.
We will move to agenda item 7, site visit updates, starting with Longmont Meals on Wheels and board member Woodley. Looks like that's you.
All right. I don't have my notes, but I'm going to go from memory. Eliberto and I met with the people from Meals on Wheels, and we were privy to meet the first shift, I'm going to say, just before they go into the change. That was quite impressive. We did a full tour of the facility, to include the kitchen, to include how they actually package the meals, prepare the meals. And if I recall correctly, some of those volunteers have been there in excess of 10 years. And they're very, very dedicated, very committed. I was very impressed with the management. The facility is very, very, very nice. And as far as the details of it, I'll have to find that. But I did have the number of meals that they do per day, the deliveries they do, essentially. And actually, I didn't see my name on here until tonight. So I will like to do a reprieve for our next meeting, and I'll have those stats for you.
Okay.
But I did take very meticulous notes, but that was months ago. I have no idea where that folder is.
I think
No,
we all
I will.
feel that way when it's our turn.
Yeah, but I would like to share that with you because I did take notes. I was impressed, and I think it's information that you should have and you should know in case you don't.
Okay.
So if it's okay, I'd like to give you more on the agenda for our next meeting.
Okay.
Madeline, did you try any of the food?
No, I did not. It looked scrumptious, but I'm not the easiest person to try and serve food. But it looked very scrumptious. It looked very healthy. And I just loved the enthusiasm that they worked with and how they got along. And, it was more of a family environment and you could feel it. And so, yeah, but I will give you more details based on the notes I took because I really wanted to share it. But I will do that next meeting if that's okay.
That's great, Madeline. And just one question, if you do remember, if you don't, that's fine. Did they speak at all about how the pandemic has shifted their business? Are they getting an increase in requests, or do you recall?
Actually, no, our visit was before the pandemic. Yeah,
Okay.
it was before. Yeah, it was before that. We actually went to their office, to the facility, and actually we were face to face, no mask. The
Wow.
pandemic, I think, it was months away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you know what? Between now and our next meeting, that is something I'll find out and include in what I give you next meeting.
Yeah, I'm curious, just in terms of our food supply. That's one of the needs, and there's been various kind of different impacts across the food supply chain, and be interested to hear how they're faring and how they've been impacted.
Absolutely. I will do, as a matter of fact, I'll just do a follow-up call to them somewhere between now and our next visit,
Thank you,
our
Madeline.
next meeting, I'm sorry.
Great, thank you. Karen?
So, so Brian, yeah, the Meals on Wheels did really step up their efforts during, during COVID. Certainly the first few months when we were shut down and stay at home. So Meals on Wheels they are not yet serving their congregate meals at the senior center, so that still remains closed. But they did really ramp up their efforts in their home delivered meals, and I know they signed up many new members. They really helped out with, in living facilities. So they really did step up and increase their, their delivery and their clients during the shutdown for sure.
That's great. And, I think some of these organizations that were already well set up for distribution door to door and had facilities for preparation we're in excuse my assistant here, we're in a pretty good position to be able to add that extra help if they were getting the support they needed in order to do it. And I also am thinking about COVID, people who are quarantining. I know there's an effort now to try to help people who are quarantining, deliver them food and meals so that they don't need to leave the house, and encourage that. So wonderful. Okay, Graham, you visited the Boulder shelter. Do you need a few minutes to get your notes?
No, I've done that already and realized that I need to work on my handwriting.
Oh, yeah. Just put it up to the camera. We'll help you decipher.
That would be embarrassing. So we did a Zoom call, Eliberto and I, with Greg over there, the boss man at the shelter, because it was 2 or 3 weeks right after the pandemic. It was directly after it settled in, and they were kind enough to still sort of carve out some time in their schedule to talk to us, and we kept it pretty brief though. They were very honest about the fact that they couldn't really meet Boulder County Public Health distancing requirements, and they weren't pretending to, and so he was just frank about that. It may be different now. It was months ago, but he's like, we're trying, we're doing what we can, but there's only so much. At the time, they were providing hotel vouchers for the elderly or the more at-risk population, and setting them up in hotel rooms for 2 weeks so they could be quarantined. At the time, they were concerned about how far they'd be able to take that, and they were looking into gathering resources. So I don't know how that panned out, if they're still able to do that, but I know that was something they were really focused on at the time, was to identify the more susceptible populations and get them in better situations than the shelter. General stats is they said they see about 1,200 different people per year. There's a lot of repeats, and then folks that maybe they struggle to document really well. 10 to 20% of those they would consider Longmont folks. So it's a couple hundred a year, different people considered to be Longmont residents that they serve, it sounded like.
What was the percentage, Graham? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
10 to 20%.
Okay.
Yeah. According to these notes anyway. And they said that there's a staff working coordinated entry in Longmont 5 days a week. That is helping that. We asked how, Longmont could help and what their biggest obstacles were. And he said something interesting to me, and that was that shelters really aren't a great solution for the problem. And he said that what we need are housing assets, and we need to work more at assisting people in transitioning well, and that really should be the focus. And what this board and Longmont can do to help is help encourage and develop and promote spaces to transition the people in shelters out of the shelters into more stable housing. And they saw in last year 119 confirmed transitioned folks into stable housing. As far as diversity, they're doing LGBTQ plus training with their staff. They're doing resident surveys, which are anonymous. They have a board member who was a shelter participant at one point, and they host informal focus groups so they can understand better about how their services are affecting their target population. And they're working closely with Hope and Homeless Solutions for Boulder County and focused outreach. I think those were the biggest things. Yeah. Any questions about that?
Thank you. Yeah. Any questions for Graham? I, as usual, do have a question, which is, it seems to me there was a time, and Karen, I think this will probably be one that you might have to weigh in on as well. But I remember a couple years ago, there was a lot of discussion about competition between the homeless services. There seemed to be not a lot of cooperation and collaboration between like the shelter and say Bridge House, which is distinctly Boulder, but the idea that it seemed like there wasn't a lot of coordination and a sense of people were fighting for each other for resources. So it's interesting, Graham, you mentioned transition, which is specifically Bridge House, and that is a Boulder program. But Bridge House that's their thing, right? Is taking people off the street and preparing them for productive housing and jobs and training. Do you know, did he mention whether they work together or not? And Karen, part of this will go to the coordinated entry, whether that maybe has repaired some of that.
I don't have any recollection of Bridge House coming up, so I'll defer to Karen on that.
Okay.
So yes, I can take that. So when we, I think certainly the homeless solutions for Boulder County was an outgrowth of some work and efforts to really have the homeless services providers be more coordinated, to really work on a common goal, common purpose, a common screening process, and then really determine what are the services that we should put in place that really moves folks faster into housing and exiting out of homelessness, rather than continuing to provide support and services that keep people living on the street and not moving people into homelessness. So that certainly brought all the providers together. For the first 2 years of Homeless Solutions for Boulder County, Bridge House was the navigation services provider for the for City of Boulder, and Hope, and then Hope in our center, and then Hope. Well, they were the navigation providers for Longmont, and then the Boulder Shelter was provided the housing focused shelter. So where folks who are experiencing homelessness and were more vulnerable, then they were, I mean, there's a whole screening criteria, but they were folks that were referred to housing focused shelter at the Boulder Shelter. So that's pretty much how how HSBC operated in the first couple of years. We rebid the services, as you might recall, in 2019 for 2020. And Bridge House no longer put their hat in the ring for navigation services. They operate what they call a ready to work program. And so, where folks live in the building, they get job training, they work either in the lawn care and maintenance services or the food preparation. So they got out of the navigation services, and Boulder Shelter now provides the navigation services for the City of Boulder, as well as the housing focused shelter for sorry. Whenever the phone rings, my dog thinks it's for him. Sorry. So anyhow, so yes, the working relationship was better. And like I said, and now Bridge House is basically saying, we're really working for folks who we're providing housing, and we are helping them with job readiness.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that explanation. I'm glad to hear it's a little more, I guess the structure helps understand how people fit in and share resources.
And Karen worked very hard on this.
And and it's not without its challenges, because there are a lot of one-off situations. There are folks that we are seeing that don't really fit into the homeless solutions system, or they're not interested, or for whatever reason they're still homeless in our communities and not engaging in services through Homeless Solutions for Boulder County. So those are challenges that we continue to deal with.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Board member Yarbrough is not here, so we will have to defer the Blue Sky Bridge discussion to our next board meeting. And
so in Alberto, I just checked, and it looked like he was even running a little bit later. So I think what I will do, Brian, if that's okay, you all had if we can move to, I have too many jobs tonight. So move to item number 6 and the home steady presentation. This presentation was in your packet. So I won't go over all the specific details, but I guess we wanted to give you at least a high level update of what's happening with Homesteady. We have, we have certainly at the end, there's Eliberto. So at the end of this year, will have been, 2 full years of operation of the Homesteady program. And so I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to check in and at this point in time, I think, unless we get different input from the advisory board, that we plan to still consider it's $200,000 that we set aside as part of our money that we have for human service agency funding to continue to invest in homeless prevention services. So anyhow, but so if you just kind of look in your packet, again, we launched the Homesteady program in April of 2018, and this was as a result of what we saw in the previous human services needs assessment that we accomplished, which had a pretty significant amount of community members or households in Longmont that were an unexpected expense, or if there was a medical situation or maybe a temporary loss of job or whatever, that there were I think it was over 30%, between 30 and 35% of households that indicated that their housing was at risk should some unexpected expense, should they incur some unexpected expense. So our interest was keeping people housed and preventing people from becoming homeless, rather than the more expensive services once folks did lose their housing. So on slides 4 and 5 of the PowerPoint that we sent out is a summary of the data for 2019, as well as through the end of July in 2020. The amount, because that $20,000 pays for a case manager. Our center is the contractor. It pays for one case manager or staff member at the our center, and then there's usually around 120,000, maybe a little bit more, that's available for direct assistance. And just a reminder that that households can receive direct payments up to $3,000. Again, so the intent is to help in whatever way would be, they're flexible dollars. So if it's an unpaid medical bill, that those dollars could go to help pay off, just so that we could keep people on track with paying their their housing costs. So it's up to $3,000 per household. So that's roughly 40 households that can be served. That they can serve maybe a few more, depending on if the household doesn't need as much of that $3,000 to get back on their feet. COVID pretty much has blown a lot of that out of the water, but we'll get to that. But so you can see in terms of 2019 that we served 47 households, and there again is some additional data that most were able to to stay in their homes. 3 of the 47 lost their housing. Some moved out of the area, but generally speaking, the folks were able to remain stably housed with the assistance they were receiving from Homesteady. Thus far in 2020, the Our Center has served 17 households, and thus far, the folks that had exited the program, none had lost their housing. Some had moved out of the area, and those kinds of things. And then again, certainly there has been a lot of rental assistance that has come the Our Center's way to help Longmont households who have been impacted by COVID. So anyhow, and one of the questions that we talked about is, so what? And Eliberto, are you on? Hello.
I can take over if you're okay with that.
I had a question. So
Yeah.
So what was the differentiation between the households that were getting assistance? So you gave me the answer, but I don't remember it.
No, I can address that. So Karen had a really good question, and it's a really good point. As you know, as we've gone into COVID, there's been a lot of resources, both federal, state, and local, thrown into housing stability, housing assistance. And so we were wondering what differentiates a household that is receiving those type of funds from a homesteady household. And what we learned was from the Art Center was when COVID first hit, basically there was no differentiation. But as they kept going and people were not getting jobs or being able to go back to jobs because their industry was still shut down, they realized that homesteading really worked better for folks that actually had a job and had some sort of medical bill. Typically it is medical bills, sometimes a situation where they had extra expenses that month in order to cover their rent. And so they kind of started screening for that. So now you need to have a job in order to get homesteady. If you don't have a job, then there is a plethora of other resources that can support you to stay housed. So that's a differentiation that happened very quickly as they learned once COVID started.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I just want to throw this out there real quick. And food distribution for food access, we've seen all kinds of unexpected things. One of them was we expected a lot more engagement with COVID happening. And for our program, we didn't see as much of an increase as we expected because we're not terribly anonymous. And what we found was that a lot of the new people who were signing up hadn't received benefits before were really migrating towards those sources where you could just pull up and put a box in the car and no questions asked, or something that was pretty anonymous. And so it's interesting, this finding that you have, and maybe that's one of the benefits, if there are any, of this situation, is that we get to learn a little bit more about our client base. Karen, you're on mute. Karen's on mute. There
I'm not anymore. So do you? Sorry. So anyhow, Eliberto, is there anything else that you want to add? And then I think the other thing is just based on what you're hearing, what you're seeing in terms of the statistics, how we're using these dollars. Is there any concern about continuing to move forward with this investment in homeless prevention services as we have outlined in Homesteading? Any stay the course, make a change, whack it, any thoughts?
So I'd like to draw the attention of, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think you have the floor, Eliberto.
One of the things that we've been really working, I've been working very diligently with the Art Center, because this is important to Karen and I think to the board, is how do we, and not just homesteading, but any program that we do, we want to ensure that we are trying to do as much of a robust evaluation process as possible. So yes, we can get you the quantitative numbers of how many we serve, how many are still housed, how many lost housing, that we keep and we know, but we've been working to ensure that we do more of a qualitative type of evaluation as well. So toward the end of your slideshow, or the slides that were in the packet, is the results of some evaluative surveys that we started doing with clients in 2020 primarily. It took us a while to get this off the ground, but it's showing some good results. And I really wanted to talk about, and let me see if I can share. Can I share my video, Erica, my screen?
I think it's co-host you have.
I think you should have co-host rights, Eliberto. You should be able to share.
Okay, I wanted to share. I wanted to talk a little bit about. I know we got a lot of stuff on the agenda, but I wanted to talk about
Gone through most of the agenda.
Okay.
And item,
So,
we've gone through it, FYI.
okay, good. Sorry, football practice went a little late. So Rita, I want to talk about a question for you. I think this is why it's important that Homesteady, what we have on Homesteady. So we have 13 answers, and you can see how it's divided. And then I actually added on there the actual breakdown of question 4. And so the question is, how confident do you feel you're going to remain in your housing for the foreseeable future? And so when you look at the breakdown, 5 are very, there's 5 that are very confident they can do it. But look at the number 3, which is, between 1 and 3, how confident they are. And you see that there's still people that are feeling a little not confident that they can remain in their housing. So I really wanted to just share that because I think it's still a challenge. And I think this is why Homesteady is important. How we deliver it, we could always change it. But I just felt that, that showed that people are still concerned about keeping their housing. And housing is a huge issue. And Homesteady has done really good work, but it's still, it's just an issue that folks in Longmont are facing and will be facing for some time until we can work on our more affordable housing. So that was my only other piece from this presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Eliberto? Councilmember Christensen?
I don't know if this is a question so much as a comment. I think you can see from the results that single parents are far and away the most vulnerable in this situation. There wasn't any kind of breakdown of ages, but single parents are in the utterly impossible situation of now having to be home to help their children who are home, but having to also somehow have a job to pay to feed the kids and have a house or room over their head. And it's very difficult. I remember when we had the RISE program, that was also the most helpful to single parents who stayed with it longer because they were highly motivated because they had such a horribly difficult time. I'm just wondering whether we have any specific program that is geared toward helping single parents in this city at all.
That's a great question. I think a lot of our programs don't necessarily focus on single parents, but I would agree with your statement that may be a major population that is served by a lot of our programs, even if that is not the particular target population. Now there are programs that we don't fund that I think are still around that focus primarily on single parents. Like I think the Pearl Group is still around. That was originally at a Life Bridge and they became their own nonprofit, and they've always been focused on single mothers. So that program I think is still around. But other than that, I don't think any program that specifically focuses on single mothers outside of the Mother House, but that is a very specific program around homelessness. Not necessarily self-sufficiency.
Yeah. It's a really good point because with COVID and children having to be home, disproportionately that burden falls on the mother. And I know that there's discussion about how far will this set back women professionally, just because of the impact of not being able to engage professionally as they normally would. So I wonder if, just kind of keeping it in the back of our minds in terms of how it fits into the needs assessment, this specific contemporaneous issue and whether we want to think about that.
I don't know if the women's work does that. I mean, they help with some things. I don't know if it's,
Right. They're more of a direct financial assistance. They don't provide the wraparound case management type of, or, you know, or professional development type of job training. There are agencies that do that, but again, they're not necessarily focused on single parents. But single parents probably make up a lot of their population.
and there's the county program, Family Self-Sufficiency.
Exactly.
So there are.
That may be a demographic when we think about outreach as a general idea, contacting people to make them aware that there are services available. I think often the people who are going to apply the least are the ones who haven't done it in the past, and they're going to have no idea really what's out there. So, that may be something worth consideration. I don't know what role we play in that, but I think it is worth thinking about because a lot of people are going to need help. A lot of people are going to be behind. Eliberto, so first of all, are there any other, Karen Phillips, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, you're just adjusting your computer. No. Anybody else have a question or comment for Eliberto? Deanna?
I guess, I don't know if you touched on this, but it looked like for the data through 2020 that if you did for basically half the year that people are accessing the program less in 2020. Do you think that's just because maybe during the first part of the shutdown, things were sort of on hold? And since July, do you have any feedback on, because we're in October now, on how the program is being accessed and whether we've seen a huge jump in it? I guess I'm just wondering if this is one of the areas that might be especially hard hit because of COVID. I mean, I feel like everything's going to need more money, but if we're really serving through this program single parents and they're being hardest hit by COVID, then should we talk about whether the same funding is appropriate, changing the funding? I don't know. Like, I don't want to open a can of worms, but if this is a really hard hit segment of the population, then maybe we should talk about whether they're going to need more resources through this program.
So, yes, 17 is low, but those are 17 who completed the program. So there's still people in there that are still going through it. We always tend to get a surge toward the end of the year. And part of it, and this is an assumption, but I think it's true, part of it is usually in the beginning of the year, you get income tax dollars that help carry folks. And then toward the end of the year, folks are struggling. So we not in the, since 2018, we've never had less than 40 clients. So I'm not too worried about it.
And I also wonder if the enhanced unemployment benefits help some people in those early months.
That's very possible. But yeah, we've always hit the numbers. So I've never. I mean, and now even more. The challenge might be finding people with jobs that fit this. So we'll a close eye on it. I talk to them on a monthly basis and sometimes more. But I'll make sure I'll keep a close eye and report back to the board.
Thank you. I have one technical question. What is non-compliance, where we have exited due to non-compliance?
Typically, that is, so in order to receive the funding, that's typically things like you have to meet with the case manager, you have to do the financial literacy, you have to, there are some requirements for the program in order to receive the funding. And so typically folks that don't want to do that, don't want to meet with the, something will happen is somebody will get the first month's rent or support and then just disappear.
Yeah.
That has happened. And so they get exited for non-compliance.
And then also, thank you for that, Alberto. Also, like on slide 7 of 2019 service access at program exit, 45% it says did not access our center services at program exit. Is that considered to be a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
So in my mind, that's a really good thing. I mean, you would want more, because what that's telling you is that those folks are no longer needing those services. They've gotten to a point financially where where they don't need to access our center services. That's a good thing. I wish there was more.
Yeah. Okay.
Still accessing it means that they're getting support from the R Center. They may not be helping them with rent, but they're helping them cover other expenses like the food or the clothing or whatever other services the R Center provides. So yeah, they're still needing support, but 45% not using is a good thing. I wish it was more.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, thank you very much, Alberto. We'll move on to our final agenda item outside of other business, which is the 2021 agency funding. And I think that's you as well, Alberto.
Yeah, and I'm pulling it up right now, and I'll share it in a second.
And just as a note for anybody who's looking through the packet, I think it says agenda item 4 on the agenda. It's item 5, but underneath agenda item 4 in the actual narrative is review 2021 human services funding, in case you're looking for it.
So tonight the goal is to do a couple of things. One is to finalize the hearing schedule, and I apologize that I hadn't sent this out before so you could have a chance to look at it. But we want to try and finalize our hearing schedule. And then the other piece is to hopefully finalize our priority allocation. And before I get there, I'll talk a little bit about why that's important and how it's used. But first, I want to start by looking at really important what our hearing schedule is. So in 2020, for the 2020 round, we had 5 hearings in a 5-week period, and they were broken up between morning, evenings, and 1 Saturday meeting. So we had 2 Thursday mornings, 2 Thursday evenings, and 1 Saturday morning meeting. I think we saw 48 applicants. I think because it was a whole lot of agencies that you all interacted with at that time. I can give you a quick update, even though it's still not. The application is not due until the 16th, but I did give an update to Karen today. So far, we only have 22 applicants that have applied, but I'm sure that some are procrastinating, and I will get a flood next week when it's due. I'm sure I'll get a bunch on Friday. But 22 is not too bad so far. I mean, if we had 22 to hear, that would be easy. But I'm sure that it'll be more than that. So Karen and I worked on some potential dates for you all to consider tonight. And we think that in order to be sufficient to have enough dates for hearings, we think we need 6. We're not necessarily going to use all 6. We may not, but we wanted to choose 6 so that we would ensure that we have enough hearings and for the upcoming round of hearings. So here are some dates that we talked to, and I think I'm gonna look at my calendar so I can see. I think November 9th is a Monday, and the 16th is a Monday. The 18th, Wednesday. 2nd is a Wednesday, and 3rd is a Thursday. So we wanted to try and get stuff before it gets really, really crazy in the holiday time. And then we had a couple of Saturdays that we could choose from. Of course, November 14th is a Veterans Day weekend, so I'm not sure, but we put it out there.
And Alberto, what time frames are you thinking for these? Morning, evening, afternoon?
Well, we have more folks working, and so we're not sure if mornings would work this time. I mean, we're always open to it, of course, but
And just to set an expectation, we're definitely going to be missing one or two board members almost every meeting. Right?
We always did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But this gives you a few weeks to actually, with the applications, to review them. So,
So
I guess what I'd say is that we're, really a starting place. So we're pretty open to whatever is going to work best for the majority of the advisory board members. So if, if you want to try to do some during the day, we can do that. Some during the evening. If you don't want to do Saturdays, we just threw some things out as a place to start. And we also assumed that since the applications are due on the 16th of October, that we probably need to give you and give us, at least a good 3 weeks to get through a good portion of the applications to review. So it's a starting place. So we're really, it'd be great to hear from the advisory board on what you want to do and what dates work and not work.
Okay, so let's add, sorry, I'm going to try to change my view here so I can see you all. There we go. Let's get some feedback.
I can stop sharing for now if you want the other view, Brian.
Yeah, it's good. I can, when I remember how, I can actually do both at the same time. So I'm good. Thank you. All right, so let's give Eliberto and Karen some feedback on this proposed schedule. Thoughts?
I liked some of the mornings, but I'm actually totally flexible because I know there have been some people that can't do that, or people that have kids at home. So whatever other people want, I'll just go along with. Because I don't have kids at home.
Caitlin?
I've got kids at home, and I think for me, the biggest thing would be to know sooner rather than later, because then I can plan around like my husband's schedule and that sort of thing. So the days of the week and so forth, all the days run together at this point. So there's no distinction between the week and the weekends in our house, but knowing sooner does mean that we can like line up if we need additional support or anything like that. So.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Graham, Deanna?
I like evenings and weekends for the most part. I can make some days work, but as a rule, weekends and evenings are best for me.
Okay. Thank you. Deanna?
I'm pretty flexible. That's why I really wasn't chiming in. I mean, like Caitlin, as long as I know far enough in advance, I can book it out on my schedule. So
yeah.
Now that we're back in school, knock on wood, we stay in school, it's a lot easier for me as well. So if we stay that way, then I'm super flexible on these days.
Okay, great. Madeline, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty flexible. Let me just ask, and you may have said it, I didn't hear it, but are any of these going, will we have virtual options, the option for virtual?
I would assume they're all going to be virtual, Madeline.
Okay, then yeah, I'm pretty flexible. Wednesdays, except for Wednesday nights. That that's the Boulder Police oversight. We're still meeting every week, so on Wednesdays. But other than that, and even with that, I'm flexible because I can juggle there. So I'm good. I'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Brian, what about you?
Well, there's a few hard meetings. I just took a look at my calendar, depending on what time of, whether it's the morning, afternoon, or evening. Otherwise, I am pretty flexible like everybody else. I could typically schedule. So for me, the days look as good a spread as anything, right? It's logical. It's got a mix of things. I think it's the time of the meeting that becomes more important. And I wonder if we could do a doodle poll agreeing on those days, but simply get some responses about what time of day are people available, morning, afternoon, or evening, right? Or morning and evening or whatever. Then maybe we can choose those time frames so everybody can plan. We know which ones we're not going to be able to make in advance. We know which ones we can make and prepare accordingly. Would that be all right with you, Eliberto, to put that together?
I think so. So
I
yeah,
just,
Nicole and I can do that.
I just think the people that have kids at home, I hope they say what's best for them because I think they take priority.
Sure. I agree. And so like for me, having a kid at home, morning, evening, afternoon, it doesn't matter. He's going to open the door and start talking to me regardless, right? So he's going to interrupt my meeting no matter what time it is. But he's old enough that we don't worry about nap time and things like that. So we do want to prioritize that. Karen, I interrupted you, I think.
No, you didn't. I was interrupting you. So, so is it fair to say that generally speaking, that we should shoot for evenings?
To the extent possible, I would love to get some morning or afternoon time simply because the evenings I'm lower energy. I'm typically, my mind isn't as, I'm trying to flush things rather than take things in. So, to the extent that we can get some of those daytimes, I like that. But
and what about Saturdays? I mean, some people love them, some people don't. So, are either those Saturday options, like you want to consider one Saturday option or?
I'd rather not. I guess I agree with Brian. It's like when you're looking at the computer all day, to do the evenings is tough because you're just fatigued from it from all day. Even though people with the kids, they get the priority, but if we could have a couple of mornings or days, that would be nice.
What about Saturdays for you, Anne?
It's all right. Just the evenings are hard, but whatever.
Okay.
I'd prefer to steer clear of Saturdays, mainly because that's the only day, the weekend's the only day, because these meetings, I started Zoom this morning at 7:30 with the Longmont Community Foundation. So, I would prefer to leave my Saturdays open if at all possible.
So it sounds like we do need to doodle it and do our best to come up with a schedule that will work for most folks most of the time.
Yeah, Caitlin.
Yeah, I'll add, I guess to Deanna's point too, like I've got one kid who's back in school. I've got one that's being homeschooled completely. So during the day, during the week, when he's actually at school, he's the younger one and is the one who would interrupt. So during the day, during the week is kind of better in that sense. Because then it's really only dealing with a 10-year-old who can actually entertain himself and, not get in our hair. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin. All right. So let's, I think, so I'm open on Saturdays, but let's say this, the days that you chose, the dates are good. If we can just doodle to get some, see the majority of times that people will be able to meet, we'll just lock those in. And I think to Anne's point, please be honest. When you have kids at home, I mean, it is one of the hardest things. So we will try to work around that as much as possible. We know that most people are not going to be able to make every single meeting. That'll be taken into consideration. And Eliberto, I'm thinking the doodle poll, I've seen some polls with this and some without, where you say yes or no, but sometimes you also have the option of it's a yellow indicator that's like, if absolutely necessary, I can do this, but I prefer not to.
Yeah, I can work with Nicole on creating that.
I'm just wondering if Alberto, you can reach out to Chiquita before you start the whole thing, or whoever's going to start it. 'Cause I have no idea what her schedule is.
Well,
She's not here
well,
tonight.
what I'm thinking of doing. So let me give you my game plan. Now that we've had this conversation as directed from the board, what I'm thinking of doing is basically sending out a doodle poll. I'm gonna, to Madeline's point, I'm gonna stay clear of Saturdays unless we really have to. And then I'm gonna put all those dates in, and I'm gonna put a morning choice, an afternoon choice, and an evening choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see what people, and it'll be, so most of these are going to be about 2 to 3 hours. They've been 3 hours in the past, which is why sometimes the evenings are hard when it's a 3 hour.
Yeah, it's 3 hours. It's not 2, Alberto.
Right.
3 or 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if we get 22 applications,
You just have 22 applications. I'm sorry. It would be
no, I know. So 3 hours. There'll be 3 hour blocks. I'll do a morning, an afternoon, and an evening, and then we'll go from that. That's the game plan. Then we'll go from there.
Great. That sounds good. Thank you.
Now, Karen, my question to you, since we're not making any decisions, do we need quorum for those?
No, we don't necessarily need a quorum, but I think really what we want to try to do is get as many people there as possible. The agencies go to a lot of work. They know it's a 9-member board, and then when they walk in the door and there's 3 board members, it's kind of deflating. So I think it's important that we get a majority of the board members at each meeting, and certainly the preference would be is that everyone is there for all of them. But I would say we certainly want a majority. We don't have to stop the show, though, if that's your question.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's the game plan. I will work with Nicole next Wednesday to start getting those things out.
Great. Thank you. All right. Awesome.
All right. So before we go, so the next piece here is the priority allocation. I'm going to just give you a little bit of background. What we're about to do is we're about to set basically the percentages that we want to apply to each of our buckets, right? We've talked about these buckets in the past, housing stability, health and well-being, self-sufficiency and resiliency, food and nutrition, education, skill building, safety and justice. So the board decided to maintain those buckets for 2021, but we need to prioritize based on what we learned from our human services needs assessment. Karen and I took a really, a new look and a hard look at the human services needs assessment. And we both felt that the best guidance, because this human service needs assessment wasn't necessarily crafted to give you an easy answer on how you should prioritize. It was really more around giving you a broad and sometimes specific picture on needs in the community. And I think it did a good job of doing that, but it wasn't necessarily set to say this is easily how you will prioritize. But we need these priorities primarily because I think the biggest thing or the biggest help they provide is they help the board as they're doing deliberations really look at ceilings, award ceilings per category, per bucket. And so that's where they're really important. The caveat I want to say, at least in the 2 years that I've been involved, is that we rarely ever stick super close to what the allocations are. Sometimes we go a little over, sometimes we go way below. But again, the importance is more around setting individual limits per priority and less about what we end up funding, because and I've said this before, we can't control, or we could, but we don't, We can't control who applies and what, well, we can't control who applies, but control what people apply for, or how much they apply for. So I just wanted to set that context as we go into the conversation. So this is what this is Karen presented this to City Council a few weeks ago. This is our human services funding set aside, right? And here's how it's broken down. You can see that the agency grant program is 877,455, which is an increase of about 107,948 from 2020. So we are increasing the amount. That is what we have for human services agency grant funding. This is the breakdown of the 2020 buckets, the 2020 allocation limits. We had housing stability at 25%, health and well-being at 17.5%, equally food and nutrition, and then education, skill building, self-sufficiency and resilience, and then safety and justice was at the end, was our lowest, and it was still 11%, so it wasn't a huge amount, I guess, between safety and justice and housing stability. So as we looked at at how we're going to prioritize for this year, again, a reminder that this human services needs assessment didn't lend itself to very readily do this. We both felt that the executive summary was the most appropriate place to find it, and you all have that. I didn't send out in this packet, but you should have a copy of that as a board already. And really what we saw, the executive summary in recommendation 1 looks at to continue to prioritize housing stability and self-sufficiency and education. And then in recommendation 3, they really bring in mental health care. And recommendation 2 was much more around how services are delivered and less about which services are delivered. So it was hard to really draw anything from recommendation 2. Recommendation 2 was really around how do we emphasize the no door is the wrong door process for resource navigation, which is, of course, I think very important, but not necessarily something that we fund directly, right? That happens outside of the purview of this board. So really, we looked at recommendations 1 and 3 that gave us things to fund. So here is where I landed. And again, these are arbitrary, and the board can change them. This is my thoughts. These are what when I read those things, I said, okay, this is the way that I would break it down. I keep housing stability at 25. I moved up self-sufficiency because that has become a bigger issue now with job losses and all sorts of challenges. Education, and in particular, when we talk about education, I'm talking about childcare slots, moved that up as well. I moved health a little bit down only because I know that with COVID, the health is still an issue, and there's a lot of federal dollars going to health. Doesn't mean that there's still not a need. Same thing with food. To me, health and food were things that are still really important, and there's a lot of money coming from a lot of places for food and health. And so that's why I felt that while they're still important, that we could use our funding a little more effectively in these other top 3 buckets. And then safety, I kept it. I mean, we were at 11% last year. We were at 10% this year. It's a need. It's always comes out, but it affects or impacts a smaller amount of the population. So I'm going to stop there for any questions, and then I'll show you what it means monetarily, unless you all want to see that first.
Let's take some questions now, Alberto, because I think just the prioritization relative to one another is a really helpful start for looking at how we would allocate funding.
Okay.
So any questions or comments for Eliberto, feedback on the way this has been organized? So while you're thinking of your really vital question that you know you want to ask, I will throw in that to, I think, kind of second what Eliberto was saying. The fact that we apply percentages and we have this formula would almost make it seem like there's a lot of science and little art to having this discussion. But I think more than anything, the way that we approach it also, and perhaps most importantly, helps us make sure that we're confident that the decisions we're making are what we believe is in the best interest of the citizens of Longmont. So it really becomes a framework for how we think about these decisions. It's not a hard and fast rule. And as Eliberto said, we don't know if enough people are going to apply in self-sufficiency to actually even ask for 20%. But if somebody stops us on the street and says, why did you fund them? This framework helps us remember that we did that because the priorities were this and that priority indicated. So that hopefully what I'm trying to say is we don't need to get too lost in the weeds, I think, but we need to be confident that we understand why we're making the choices we're making, and particularly, and they are relative to one another. So I kind of extended into bloviating, so I'll stop there for a moment, but any questions or feedback? Does this look good to everybody? Should we interpret the silence to mean, okay, we got some thumbs up? All right, so I agree. I think it looks good. My only question, and it's really a question of clarification, education, if I remember the needs assessment, I think the education component was oriented towards job skills training or developing skill sets for employment. Is that right?
Right, but typically for us, that falls under self-sufficiency.
Okay. So, and the reason I'm asking is because we're going to see impacts of COVID and people losing their jobs for years. So trying to recover lost income, trying to recover lost opportunity. Is there a sense, do you recall from the needs assessment, of whether a fair number of people will not be able to recover as quickly because they're not going to be trained for opportunities that will become available next year or the year after? Or is it really we just lost a chunk of time that we were working and therefore we don't have that income? So I'm wondering if COVID has changed the way we think about job education as being the importance that it is.
So I can speak a little bit to some of the population. So the way that human services needs assessment primarily worked around population was based on HUD, because remember this is an addendum to the human services need assessment that was part of the consolidated plan. However, and that primarily focuses on housing. So a lot of their survey questions were around homeowners, renters, that kind of, but there are some points where they talk about people who are hurt the most or will be challenged the most. And they talk about what we talked earlier, single parents, people without high degrees, and Karen, I don't remember the other one. You and I talked about it, but what was the other one?
So you cut out, did you say disabilities? People with
disabilities? Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, so we did find that those were the populations that talked about being impacted the most by COVID.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. So I think that'll be important for us to keep in mind as well when we look at that general category and we start going through applications is the understanding of those specific needs within that category.
Yeah, and Brian, what I would also add is that if you recall that most of the data gathering occurred pre-COVID, so the
Yeah.
surveys, all that data, and so what we have that talks about job loss and job acquisition came out in the focus groups, and so I think there's some, so that's basically what we have. But I think certainly there are folks we heard from in the focus groups that they have, it's a new normal for them. Their opportunity and doing what they did before is probably not coming back. So
Okay. Thank you. And one of my thoughts is like housing stability. It seems to be the bedrock of all the others. It's like every year here, I seem to better understand that if people are in their homes, they're feeling safe, there's more secure, there's more stable, and they can pursue some of these others. So I like that self-sufficiency is actually the second priority because I think in many ways, of course, they're linked.
So I'm going to show you now what it means. And again, it's really about helping us set a price ceiling. In the past, we hardly ever stick to these numbers. We come close sometimes, but typically we do vary.
they really are guideposts.
Right, exactly. To Brian's point, it's a framework. It doesn't tie us in completely. It just gives us a framework. So this is what it would look like with as the numbers are. Those are the limit amounts, and you can see that it does definitely favor housing stability at 25%. But there's still quite a bit of funding for all the other priorities.
Categories.
And I wanted to also show a comparison of 2020. So this is what the numbers were in 2020.
Are these the actual numbers for 2020 or what the kind of like bucket amounts were?
The bucket amounts.
Okay.
I can actually quickly look up what we spent. I can tell you that education, we spent a lot more than that on education. Education, in particular child slots, is one of our biggest requests. We have a lot of providers that come asking for education dollars. We did not spend, I can also tell you that we didn't spend all the safety and justice dollars last year. And I don't think we spent all the housing stability dollars. I think we did spend all the self-sufficient. We spent a little more than that self-sufficiency. But usually those are education and health were ahead of self-sufficiency last year.
Do we publish these priority limits to the applicants during their process?
We have not in the past.
I think one of the challenges with having a structured approach, a numbers-based structured approach, is avoiding, people will naturally have an inclination to try to use the approach to their advantage if possible. And so as much as we can minimize that, and that's part of our job in the interviews as well, is to make sure that requests are substantiated. I'm excited, frankly. I mean, I'm really grateful for council having agreed to increase the amount of funding over time. It's exciting to me to see these increased numbers in these areas. It's certainly the right direction, and it just feels good. It feels like there's some recognition of the importance of these services. So I'm grateful for that.
So I guess, do we need a, I think that's my last slide. Do we need a motion for this turn to approve these priority amounts?
Yeah, let's entertain a
I
motion.
think it'd be good. Then we'd have clear direction that that's going to be our framework.
Yeah. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the funding amounts presented by Eliberto as the guidelines of maximum funding in each category?
So moved.
Madeline moves. Caitlin, this was your chance. I was looking straight at you. Caitlin seconds. Okay. All right. Any other discussion, concerns, questions, clarifications? Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, Madeline, you're going to have to give a verbal unless you can go on camera. Everybody on camera, raise your hand, please. Madeline, are you okay? I got it. Thank you. So we've got Madeline and Deanna, Caitlin, Karen Phillips, Graham, and myself. So the vote is unanimous to approve those limits.
So thank you all. Next steps, just to show newer board members, I'm going to take what you just voted on, and I'm going to use that in creating a matrix. And Karen and I need to work on the weighting piece. That's something that staff does. But that'll be part of a matrix that you will all see once you fill out your applications. I need to upload your evaluations. All of you should have a EC Impact account. I know I already did that. If you don't and access it, please reach out to me. Karen and I will work on the matrix. Karen and I will work on the weighting piece, because that's also very important. And I'll use those priority limits that you just set to set individual award ceilings. That's how they're used, as I mentioned earlier, per category. So those are the next steps.
Great. Thank you. So Eliberto, applications they're due on the 16th. When will they be available for us to review? Are they available now as they come in, or?
No, because it's not closed. It has to close.
Okay.
I will try and get them that Monday. I'll try and work over the weekend to make sure you guys have them by the Monday.
Okay.
Monday of the 19th.
Great.
That'll be my goal. It shouldn't be that difficult. I'm getting better at the EC Impact process now. So I should probably have it by Monday.
So just for our new members, because we won't meet again until after those have gone out, if Graham and Ann, do you have any kind of thoughts on efficiencies you have found in reviewing those, or methodologies you use? Because it can become overwhelming very quickly and difficult to know how to, at least in my experience, difficult to know how to kind of measure one against the other. Do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share? And Madeline as well.
My 2 cents I would offer is to try to read the applications of the people you're about to see present. And that was really helpful for me to do.
So read them like within some time, like right before presentation, or so they're fresh and okay.
Yep.
So Graham, would you score them while they were presenting, or did you score them afterwards or before?
After. I feel like the hearings went too fast to really do a good job of scoring. And so I would, I think familiarizing yourself with what we're scoring them on before we start hearings is really important. And then I would take shorthand notes and then even create an outline for my notes about what we scored the folks on, like diversity, or, are they taking input from their people and improving their systems, et cetera. And then that would help me sort of tailor my questions, and then I could take shorthand pen and paper notes, and then go back later and hopefully without too much time and score the organizations which I had recently just seen present, because I think if it was too much time, it was hard to remember, and so I honestly I would even put in notes about the people who presented, so it would help me trigger what color hair they brought, a briefcase or something to help my memory, because 3-4 hours and they're just rolling in and out and in and out, and just any sort of trick to help put an association between the people and the screen and computer software you're scoring them on.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Madeline, do you have any suggestions?
Well, in addition to Graham's excellent comments, I would, one of the things that people commented to me about was they felt we were engaged and very, very much so into what they were presenting, because we were taking notes during the time that they were presenting. And while it is kind of hard to keep up and try to catch, you can basically get the main point. So, yeah.
Great.
So being able to take the notes during their presentations, I think, gives them a sense that we're paying attention and that what they're saying is important.
Great. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank
and
you.
Anne, wisdom?
No more than that. I mean, it was good eye contact, but I don't know if we can do that now or if it does still work. So,
yeah. Alberto?
And I just want to remind the board that I think with your feedback, and I appreciate your feedback, I've redone the board evaluation and made it hopefully run a lot closer to the application. One of the things the board provided feedback was on that the application and the evaluation didn't run parallel and sometimes didn't make sense, or it was hard to make the connection. And hopefully I've done a good enough job that as you're doing this, the evaluation itself will help you maybe even prepare for the hearing. So.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited with those changes. And for myself, I'm a perpetual procrastinator. I'm certain that it's one of those social behaviors where my mind is much sharper under pressure, and that's the reason I do it. But I almost always wait what I feel is too long. What I have found really helpful, though, is to come in to the interviews with 1 or 2 questions that are very specific and of specific interest to me, because it makes me feel more engaged during the presentation because I'm listening to certain things. And as Graham mentioned, this is the do as I say, not as I do. If you can finish as quickly as possible after the evaluation. Just as a note, I find it really challenging every year because there is no absolute scale, right? It's a relative process between 5 groups who are proposing to serve this area. It's like, well, this one is, I would say is not quite as good as this one. And so one of the challenges I have is getting to the end of evaluating something and thinking, gosh, if I knew what I knew now, I'd probably evaluate that first one differently. But if you have good notes, like Graham indicated and Madeline indicated, then you can always go back. So just engagement. All right. Thank you for the feedback. And I just learned a lot myself. Yes, Karen Phillips.
Do we get this stuff through the email, or how do we get this information to look over or on?
So Karen, you should have already gotten from me. And if
yeah,
you
I
don't,
did.
You should. So right now there's nothing for you to see because I have not populated your account.
Right. I think, Alberto, the question is, if I'm understanding, are these are right online application reviews? So
No, that's No. I just, the answered was right. I mean, he'll let me know. He'll let me know what's going on by an email is what I meant to say.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is a pull process. It's not a push process. So nobody pushes the applications to us. We have to log in and pull them down.
Correct. But
Got
I'll
it.
email you
Thank-
once they're all uploaded and everything ready to go.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Alberto, for all the work on that. I think everything looks really good. It'll be a good year for evaluations. I can feel it. And I think it'll be an exciting year for our partners to deliver services because they're definitely needed. Okay, is there any other business? Graham?
Do we have any part to play or support to provide council with this parking lot for helping, folks living in their vehicles and RVs?
Good question. Councilmember Christensen?
This is a possibility. It's a discussion of a possibility. There are a lot of pluses and minuses, and it's dependent completely upon the county. We have no control over that. The RV, what was asked is to have a discussion with the county about whether they would allow us to reserve a few spaces down at the campground, which is closed in the wintertime because when they never envisioned anything but a summer campground. So when they put the piping in, they put the piping in about a foot below the ground. So they have to turn the water, so they have to drain it and turn it off in the winter, like, any sprinkler system. So people will have to be self-sufficient if they go down there. But in any case, I think, and Karen could verify this, I think that the county is open at least to people with RVs being able to dump their gray water and black water down there, which means sewage. And that would be very helpful because that's one of the biggest problems. But the other big problem is that all the RV parks in the county have waiting lists. There isn't a place for people to go, but we can't let them live on the streets either because they're creating a huge amount of, not everybody, but they're creating a huge amount of trash, human waste, needles, general trash, and insecurity in residential areas, and also some commercial areas where bad things are going on, and the people who leave those commercial areas have to go past or through RV bunches of RVs that are can be scary. There are places where people are doing drugs, selling drugs. So we have about 61 RVs that are kind of a chronic problem roaming around this city. And it was okay when there were 2 or 3. It's not okay now. We have to do something. But what? Winter's coming up. We can't let them keep living on the street, especially with COVID, because when they throw out trash and stuff, so it's a very difficult problem. And but whether Boulder County will let us issue a certain number of permits for people to park down there is unknown. It's up to the county. But the other thing is that is also, if there was a big fire or a flood, God forbid, that campground would have to be used for people and for animals being evacuated, and so it was never intended to be an all-year campground. So it's a very complicated situation. Do you have any other questions about it, though?
I don't. I was just curious if this board could offer assistance or help with any of that.
Right, that's what I was just going to ask. Is that was that your question? Is there either a desire or an opportunity, for the advisory board to weigh in? And I would say that, to add on to what Polly said, is that I think that the primary advisory body is going to be the Homeless Solutions for Boulder County. So it is there is an executive board and a policy team that they're basically are going to be the folks that are reviewing this and making a recommendation to the commissioners, and those recommendations will inform the commissioners. But if there is something, but those meetings where they will deliberate, the executive board, those are public meetings. So, again, so if you are interested in getting information about this, want to weigh in, to the executive board of HSBC. So those things are all possible, kind of depending on what your desire is. I think what the commissioners would really be interested in terms of the fairground is just, we would want folks that would need temporary place to stay to be engaged in the Homeless Solutions for Boulder County effort, so that they can get on the path to housing.
Yeah, it seems it's so complicated, and when you raise security issues and the idea of is a distributed solution better than a concentrated solution for those reasons, and it really gets challenging. I wonder occasionally about the sugar mill, and would that be a temporary location? Because of course they're already parking everything that's made out there for storage, so could that serve as some kind of grounds, but that's privately owned.
So, I think it just helps Eliberto and I continue to work harder to find solutions in terms of housing that is more stable, that is more secure. So we're working with Boulder County to submit a grant to the state for some possible additional dollars, and so we'll put our hat in the ring about that. We are looking at a variety of other options, but so it just compels us to continue to find housing exits for folks who are living in very unstable situations and are looking for more permanent housing.
Well, thank you for all the work that you and your staff do, Eliberto and Karen, on that, because it's the issue.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Madeline.
Yes, I just have a couple of things. One, the Longmont Community Foundation is sponsoring a seminar specifically on how to recruit, how to diversify your boards, how to recruit to diversify your board of directors for organizations. I can send Karen, if you don't know about it, I can send Karen the details of the event. That's one thing. And then the last thing is, some time ago, was Karen talking? Oh, I thought Karen was speaking. I didn't hear you.
So Madeline, I just would say go ahead and do send me another copy of that notice. I did get one, but it would be helpful to have another one, and that we can send it out to the advisory board.
Okay, I will do it. And the other thing is, some time ago, we voted as a board to do photographs and brief bios. And different things got in the way that preempted that. And I am very much interested in following through on that and completing that. And so I was wondering, is that something we are still going to do? Yeah.
Well, that is a great question. So I think we should still do it. How we would do such a thing, I'm not sure, although I did, Madeline, just to get this moving, yes. I did get a screenshot here of all of us and figure that can be at least the placeholder for us. Although we are
Madeline, you have a good memory.
Well, yeah, and the first person that became ill, and I ran into him not too long ago. I'm trying to remember his name. Dave, was it? Do you guys? Anyway, he left us because of health reasons, and right. That was one thing that deferred it. And then of course there have been a number of things, but the thing that makes me know that we can do it is Adriana Correa with LMAC and with Community Neighbor. I think you guys know her. At any rate, she just she continues to update the LMAC website, and I know she just tweaked it with some information that I sent her, so it's doable. Okay. Just individually.
Why don't we do this, Madeline? Because this is a task that has languished for years. So can you get me the contact of the individual that you just spoke about who's doing it? I will reach out, unless Karen already knows.
So what I would just say, Brian and to Madeline, clearly that this is something that we want to do the year, and I have to tell you that since March there is, we hardly are getting anything done. So we will. So it doesn't have to be Adriana. We can certainly we can work with Nicole and so my efforts have really been diverted away from thinking about that, Madeline. I'm sorry. So we will put it back on the agenda. We will get organized. I'll put it in the notes, and when Nicole gets back, we will put together a plan to get that accomplished.
Okay, so
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, 17 minutes early, I will, Actually, at like 7:30, it looked like we were going to be done at 7:45, but here we are now at 8:45. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
Karen Phillips makes the motion to adjourn. Deanna seconds. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Y'all too.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.